All right, let's talk about one of the most critical, and let's be honest, one of the most confusing parts of the cloud, AWS Identity and Access Management, or IAM. This thing is the security backbone for literally everything you do in AWS. If you get it wrong, you've got a huge problem. So let's make sure we get it right.
So picture this. You've got this massive digital library, right? Thousands of files, and your team is growing. How in the world do you give every single person the exact key they need for the exact file they're allowed to touch without just handing over the master key to the whole building? Well, that question right there is the problem IAM was built to solve.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll talk about the core challenge. Then, we're going to meet the key players on your new security team. After that, we'll see how they actually make decisions. We'll compare permanent versus temporary access, which is huge. And finally, we'll wrap up with a security playbook you can use today.
Okay, let's dive right in. Section 1, the challenge. You know, when you strip away all the jargon, cloud security really just boils down to one question. Who gets the keys to your digital kingdom, and what doors can they open once they're inside? And the answer to that question in the AWS world is IAM. It's a service that does two really critical jobs. First, authentication, which is just a fancy way of saying prove you are who you say you are. And second, authorization, which is deciding what you're actually allowed to do. Think of it like a bouncer at the front door who checks your ID, and then a set of rules that says which rooms you can go into. It's both, all rolled into one. All right, moving on. To really get how IAM works, you need to meet the 4 core components. I like to think of them as the members of your own personal security team. You've got users, groups, policies, and roles, and each one has a very specific job.
First up, the IAM user. The absolute best way to think of a user is as an individual person. They have their own unique identity, kind of like a passport, and their own permanent key to get into the system.
So the most important thing to remember about a user is that it represents one person, or maybe a specific application, and it has long-term credentials. That means a password for logging in or access keys for using the command line. This is the kind of identity you'd create for, say, a developer who just joined your team.
Next up on the team is the IAM group. Now, a group isn't a person. It's more like a bucket. The analogy is super simple. It's a team, like your dev team or your marketing team. It's just a way to organize your people.
And here's why groups are so powerful. They make your life way easier. Instead of giving the same permissions to 50 different developers one by one, you just give those permissions to the developers group. Then, when a new person starts, you just pop them in the group and bam, they instantly have all the access they need. A group itself has no keys. It's just a container for rules.
Okay, this brings us to what I think is the most important member of the team, the IAM policy. If a user is a person and a group is a team, the policy is the official rulebook. It's a document that spells out in painstaking detail exactly what is and is not allowed.
And every single rule in this book has 3 main parts. The effect, which is either allow or deny, the action, which is what you're trying to do, like read a file, and the resource, which is the specific thing you're trying to read, like a file in an S3 bucket. It's this combo that lets you get incredibly specific. And here's the golden rule. You got to remember this. A single explicit deny will always override any allow.
And finally, we have the IAM role. Now this one is a little different. It's not a person with a permanent key. A role is more like a temporary guest pass, or maybe a security guard's uniform. You put it on to do a specific job, and when you're done, you take it off. The whole point here is that a role's credentials are temporary. They're handed out for a short period of time, and then they just expire. This makes roles the absolute gold standard for security when you need to give permissions to applications or services, because you avoid the #1 security risk, leaving a permanent secret key lying around in your code where someone could find it.
So we've met the whole security team. Now in Section 3, let's see them in action. How do all these pieces, the users, groups, roles, and policies, all come together to make a split-second security decision every time you try to do anything in AWS?
It's a 4-step process that happens in a flash. First, you make a request. You try to view a file. Second, AWS checks your identity through authentication. Third, it does the authorization step. It looks at all the policies attached to you, to your groups, and to any roles you're using. And finally, it makes a decision. The logic is simple. If there is even one deny rule that applies, you're out. If not, and there's at least one allow rule, you're in.
This really brings us to the central idea, which is summed up perfectly here. Policies are the permission glue of IAM.
They're the things you attach to users, groups, and roles to actually give them power. Without a policy attached, an identity is totally useless. It can't do a single thing.
That brings us to Section 4, and this is probably the most critical distinction to really get your head around in all of IAM, the difference between a permanent user and a temporary role. Getting this right is a game changer.
So let me ask you directly, when does it make sense to give someone a permanent key that's theirs forever versus a temporary pass that expires in an hour? The answer to that question pretty much defines your entire security posture.
Let's just break it down side by side. Look at the core function. A user is all about identity. Who are you? A role is about temporary permission. What can you do right now? Now look at credentials. Users have long-term keys, roles have short-term, expiring ones. Who uses them? Well, users are for people, roles are for services. And finally, the action. An identity is a user, but it assumes a role.
So it all boils down to this incredibly simple rule of thumb. If you're giving access to a human being who needs to log in and do work, create an IAM user for them. If you're giving access to an application, a server, or any other kind of automated process, you should always use an IAM rule. All right, for our final section, let's turn all this theory into a real actionable playbook. These are the essential best practices you should go and check in your AWS account, like right now.
Rule number 1, and this one is completely non-negotiable. Protect your root user. This is the God mode account you got when you first signed up. It can do absolutely anything, including deleting your entire account. So you need to lock it down with a crazy strong password, turn on multi-factor authentication, and then put it away in a virtual safe. Never, ever use it for your daily tasks.
And your checklist continues with these 3 pillars. First, always enforce the principle of least privilege. That just means you only give people the absolute minimum permissions they need to do their job and not a single thing more. Second, manage those permissions using groups and roles, not by sticking policies directly onto individual users. And third, turn on multi-factor authentication, MFA, for every single human user, no exceptions.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought. When you think about IAM, try not to think of it as just a locked door. A locked door just stops everyone. Instead, think of it as a smart, dynamic system. A system of unique keys, temporary passes, and really clear rulebooks. A system that doesn't just block the bad guys, but actually empowers your team to move fast and innovate safely.